everybody, and welcome to a very special episode of Hot for Teacher. And I say that a lot. I say a very special episode of whatever the hell it is that I'm doing a lot, but this one's actually special, or at least it's going to be different. It's going to be a different one. So normally Hot for Teacher is a write-in relationship advice show, spinoff from the call-in tabletop RPG game mastering advice show, Office Hours. And normally, every week on Hot for Teacher, I answer 3 questions from the audience about friendship, about love, about relationships, about doing it, and other assorted ephemera of mashing human beings together. Now, that's still the general structure of the show these days. And if you want to get involved, you can go to www.adam-koble.com, click on Hot for Teacher, fill out that form. But today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Instead of answering 3 questions from the audience, I'm going to focus on a single topic. This topic is something that I suspect is going to be on a lot of people's minds this week. When we get to the end of the episode, I'm going to leave some room for a Q&A. So if you have questions about today's topic or just general stuff vis-a-vis relationships, we'll try to live answer a few of them at the end. We'll do a little lightning round at the end of the episode. So if you're watching this live on Twitch, you can use the question feature of my Twitch overlay to ask me things. Or when we get to the Q&A, you can at me in the chat, and I'll try to answer a few questions. So, what's so special about this week? What's so special about February? Is it that it's a leap year? No, I don't think so. No. As of the recording of this episode, tomorrow is a significant day in the world of Western culture's romantic paradigm. The 14th of February, Valentine's Day, is a day where semi-specific commercialized rituals are performed to reinforce a normative, couple-oriented romantic situation. Now, depending on your point of view and where you're situated in the world, February 14th might be a sort of cute and fun way to celebrate a relationship with a partner. It might be a source of anxiety or sadness. Or February 14th might just be nothing at all. Now, for me, personally, a holiday like Valentine's Day is almost always a trigger for feelings of externally sourced pressure and anxiety, as well as an exercise in frustrating anxiety-inducing expectation politics. So this year I wanted to dedicate a little bit of time to talk about not just Valentine's Day as a thing, but the ideas that Valentine's Day attempts to represent. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how a culturally mandated day of celebrating love, a very specific kind of love, might impact the way that we think about our relationships. So before we really get into it, before we dig in, I do want to say this. You, individual member of my audience, you might love Valentine's Day. It might be a special day for you and for people you care about to go out of your way to express that particular kind of feeling for each other. It might be a nice excuse to be romantic and mushy. And that's okay. Just because I might talk shit about the concept of Valentine's Day doesn't mean that the practice of Valentine's Day can't work for you. So I've said it before, and I think the kind of core of what bugs me about Valentine's Day, and to a lesser extent, Christmas, birthdays, anniversaries, whatever. We're not going to talk about those. We're here to talk about Valentine's Day. But I think what bothers me about these sorts of holidays, and one of the biggest things that can negatively impact a relationship of any kind, is the feeling that we are acting not out of choice, but out of obligation. So obligation, in this sense, of feeling like there are things that we have to do in a relationship. Behaviors we have to perform, actions that we have to take, specific things we feel we are expected to do. Now, I am fully of the mind that no person, for no reason, should ever do anything they don't want to do. Seems like it makes reasonable sense, right? Sometimes I think that this is a matter of consent, right? Sometimes we simply don't consent to something, and we shouldn't feel forced to do that thing. For example, we shouldn't expect to let someone touch us that we don't want touching us, right? Or we shouldn't be expected to let someone call us something we don't want to be called. We should never go anywhere or do anything against our will. Pretty common idea, I think. In relationships, feeling obligation overriding our consent can be overt, right? In the case of, say, maybe someone tries to kiss you without you explicitly letting them know that that's something that you want. Or it can be more subtle, right? Just letting someone call you their boyfriend, even though you're not really comfortable with it, because maybe it makes them happy. Obligation in a relationship can look like a lot of different behaviors. But for me, it pretty much always feels the same. Obligation feels like a combination of frustration and disappointment matched up with an overriding sense of powerlessness. So if you think about the relationships in your life, think about all the relationships that you have. I bet that you can come up with at least a few times where you felt obligated to do something that you didn't want to do. The idea that if you didn't do the thing, somehow you were the wrong person in that situation. Somehow you were doing a disservice to the relationship, whether we're talking about romance, or we're talking about friendship, or we're talking about sex, or anything else where two people's desires intersect. In a relationship, nothing should feel like an obligation, and certainly nothing should feel like an outright violation of your consent. I would love to live in a world, and I guess to an extent, that's why I'm doing this episode at all. I would love to live in a world where nobody does anything because they feel like they have to. And I know that for me, I would certainly never want to be in a relationship with someone whose actions felt to them obligatory, right? You don't want someone performing behaviors because they think you want to, right? You want, I assume, you want authenticity from the people that are around you, and you want to be able to perform your own authentic reality for them. Now, that isn't to say that all we ought to do ever are the things that we want to do right now in the moment, right? This isn't to say that we should always just say no to anything that is new or that challenges our ideas or our desires. This doesn't imply that we should be static about how we act or how we feel. if we just said no to everything because it wasn't exactly 100% what we wanted all the time, we would both miss out on a great deal of life's grand experience, but also we'd probably all end up being pretty selfish douchebags. I think instead, what we can do to become better at avoiding obligation without also being static objects when it comes to our relationships and the activities therein is cultivate a sense of understanding the difference between I don't want to do this and I'm neutral about this. There's a concept in consent theory circles about what's called enthusiastic consent to activities, meaning that I'm gonna pare it right down. Right, there's a lot more to enthusiastic consent than this, but the idea is that we ought not to do something with someone unless we have their clear, explicit, positive, 100% yes, good, I want this feedback that they want the thing. And I think that's really important, especially when it comes to sexual consent. But sometimes there's room for less certainty on the part of the person giving consent. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that anything except yes is yes. There's no gray area in consent. But I think that sometimes enthusiasm can come after agreeing to something. Let me frame this more personally. I'll stop dancing around it. So maybe some of you can relate. This is how it is for me sometimes. I have a hard time giving a shit about just about anything. I know, you might seem weird. I can come across as a very passionate person. I care deeply about some things, but for the most part, when presented with just about anything, the way my brain works, if I'm not already doing a thing, everything looks and feels like an obstacle, a chore, or a frustration. Even things that I think I will love, I have a hard time feeling like I want to do them, right? An old friend, a dear old friend that I have not seen for months, comes to town and asks me if I'd like to go for a drink. And of course, I think, yes, of course I would. I miss you desperately. I would love to see you. And then when it comes down to it, like an hour before, all I want to do is cancel. Because going out and seeing a friend and having drinks and talking and sharing, some significant part of me is like, yeah, but like you're already lying on your bed looking at Twitter. You could do that for 3 more hours. So playing a role-playing game that I love with people I know will be fun to hang out with and for which I am being paid moments before we go live, I wish that I had never agreed to any of it. When someone suggests to me that I try something new or I do something with them that they like, and I don't know what I think about it, I have had to teach myself to get over that looming feeling of this is going to be awful, or even just this, I don't want this, and instead say, I'm feeling uncertain about it, but I'm down to give it a try. If it were a requirement that my enthusiastic consent were present before I did anything with anyone, I would never do anything. I wouldn't even be here now, sitting in this chair, talking to you. For me, and something that I would suggest that everyone think about, navigating consent, not as a binary gate, not as a yes, I will or no, I won't situation, treating consent as an ongoing process with the people you are with, the ability to say, yes, for now, but if I change my mind to a no, I trust that you will support me is so important because it allows us to navigate our relational space with other people by building on a foundation of curiosity. Let me give you an example, okay? So last night in Nebula Jazz, this is like a real example of negotiated group consent renegotiating behavior. So last night in Nebula Jazz, I'm not going to spoil anything because it was literally 12 hours ago. But last night we were playing Nebula Jazz, and I have played that role-playing game with the group that I've played it with for a long time. These are old friends of mine. We've been playing games for years. We trust each other to collaboratively tell a story, and sometimes we have feelings about that story. And we got to a point in the game where one of my players was having a deep emotional response to something that was going on. There was a revelation in the game, and one of my players didn't get upset, but they were feeling emotional. They were getting overwhelmed. Their consent to participate in the game didn't apply anymore. And we were able as a group to move back from that space to say, okay, all right, so you don't have to stick with this just because you said yes back at the beginning. You are feeling overwhelmed. Let's take a step back from that scene. Let's put things on pause and renegotiate how we can get your consent to keep playing the game. In this way, I think we're able to look at the fundamentals of any relationship, right? Like for me, I love being exposed to weird new stuff, including weird new feelings. And every person that I get to know is a chance to learn about new music, new activities, new food, to become a better, more well-rounded person, which is what that curiosity can give me. But I have to have that feeling of safety around, I want to negotiate a way out of this. I want to say no. I'm not necessarily enthusiastic about it. This gives me space when someone says, do you want to try this restaurant that I love? I can say yes without it feeling like an obligation. I don't have to. I have not consented to going to every restaurant that this person wants to. Even if I'm not sure I'm going to like it, I can say yes, and if I don't like it, we can leave, or I can just never go there again. There's no sense of obligation. Now, I'm not saying that we need to just be open to anything, but we do need to recognize the way our own brain works. We need to recognize our patterns, and we need to know what is a boundary that we shouldn't allow anyone to cross versus what's just a reticence to try anything that we're not already an enthusiastic yes on. All of this builds into what I was talking about before about obligation. Obligation being the behavioral pattern of following along, doing a thing because you feel like it is expected of you. And that's the flip side of the coin, right? The coin that is fundamentally a lot of relationship behaviors, but the coin of a holiday like Valentine's Day. Expectation and obligation are the two things that I think will ruin a relationship. Expectation is the kind of thing that can prompt or elicit feelings of obligation in someone else, right? I think expectation is something that needs to be avoided just as stringently. The idea that without discussion, buy-in, agreement, or consent, we think someone will behave a certain way or do something that we want them to can be ridiculously toxic to a relationship's well-being. Almost above and beyond obligation, expectation can be insidious. Both because pervasive cultural relationship narratives tend to enforce specific anticipated behavior, and because folks generally just have a difficult time having conversations about things we might expect to be a given in a relationship. Take a second to think about a friend, right? Not like a specific friend, but think about what you envision a friendly relationship to be like. Think about the the kind of friendships you might have with a person. What are the parameters of that relationship? What things do you unquestioningly assume that a friend would or wouldn't do? Now, try that again with a romantic relationship. What kinds of things feel like they're an inherent part of a romantic relationship, right? When you think of romance as a thing, what is and isn't inherently a part of that? Now, think about those assumptions and apply them to a specific relationship in your life. Do those relationships match up with your expectations 100% of the time? I bet not. I bet you've had times where you've been disappointed because your expectations weren't met. I bet you've done things that someone else didn't expect, and they've gotten upset about it. Much of the strife that comes up in relationships can be attributed to a violation of this expectation. In a normative escalator-style romantic relationship, there may be an expectation that neither person flirts with other people. There might be an expectation of inevitable cohabitation. In a friendship, there might be an expectation of regular contact, or that certain activities are de facto shared between people. Listen, if you play racquetball every Tuesday with Bill, and one day you find Bill playing racquetball with Rodrigo on a Wednesday, you might feel hurt or put out. Aren't you and Bill special racquetball buddies? Expectations in relationships aren't necessarily the poison that obligation can end up being, provided, and this is the key takeaway here, provided expectations are negotiated. Unnegotiated expectation can be such a heartbreaker, and it can run from the smallest, most casual relationship all the way up to the deepest lifelong friendships. If you don't navigate your expectations with someone else, they don't count for shit. They're nothing. They're pho. They're thin broth. They're nothing. Talk to people about the things that are your expectations, right? I don't think that it's unreasonable to expect things from people, right? If we could never exert that kind of control over our relationships, or the illusion of that control, we'd live in a world of constant and turbulent emotional unpredictability. It would be chaos. But the thing is, we have to twist the way we look at these things. We have to not let our expectations change people's behavior. We need to talk about these things, right? Have conversations about expectation. Allow each other to discuss the things that we would like to be able to rely on. And that's how we build consent practice out of obligation and expectation. We can throw those away and instead build agreement. Right? So, okay. When you start dating someone, right? When you start spending romantic time with somebody, whatever that looks like, when you've agreed that these are dates, have a conversation about what it means. Does it mean that you're going to see each other once a week? Does it mean that you want to do sexy stuff together? Does it mean you stop doing romantic or sexy stuff with other people? In this way, our internalized expectations become tempered by input. They become reformed by agreement. and made into the actual consent-driven behavior that makes up our relationships. Agreement rather than expectation. Choice instead of obligation. So, what does all that have to do with Valentine's Day? In a lot of ways, Valentine's Day is the ultimate expression of cultural, externalized obligation and expectation. In our everyday lives, there are subtle pressures to act a certain way. Show deference to your boss, regardless of what a shithead he might be. Respect your elders, because your racist-ass grandma deserves your respect inherently, because she's old. Treat the people around you a certain way because of their gender, their religion, their bodies. We are constantly exposed to a fire hose of behavioral expectation from our culture. But as far as relationships go, February the 14th is the big boss of cultural pressure, right? All of the normative, monogamous, escalator-style, cultural, mythological bullshit comes to a triumphant, chocolate-buying, red heart-shaped, card-exchanging, insidious head on Valentine's Day. The reason that it's all such bullshit isn't just because I think love is dumb and darkness is cool, but because nobody I know consented to being pummeled by Valentine's Day. That's the thing. Setting aside a specific day where you've agreed to celebrate your love or enjoy your friendship or just feel your feelings about how much you like boning somebody is sweet and can be a wonderful excuse to feel nice about someone or something, and choosing to set that day aside is what makes it important. Discussing the ways in which we celebrate our relationships, defining together what to do and how to do it, that's the thing that gives it meaning. Valentine's Day is not that thing. Valentine's Day is something that's been packaged and stamped with a very specifically designed capitalistic message and given to us as a stand-in for the thing that we should actually have built with the people that we love, but have not been given the tools or had the foresight to do so. And that's what makes Valentine's Day so fucking abhorrent, right? It's the lowest common denominator appropriation of what love is supposed to feel like. And inherent to its pervasiveness, it just pushes out and obviates any authentic affection we might actually allow ourselves to feel. This is the kind of thing that happens with tradition sometimes. Not just Valentine's Day. Our lives are full of expectation, real or imagined, that create a sense of behavioral obligation in ourself and in everyone else. And Valentine's Day hits us where it hurts, right? I don't know anyone who thinks Valentine's Day is just like this pure, perfect, clean, safe, fun expression of the way that they really feel. Which I think is what makes Valentine's Day so much fun to subvert, right? Along with all the productized sentiment in this kind of Newtonian opposite push, there is always a stream of explicitly counter Valentine's Day content that wanders by on the 14th, right? For every post about Valentine's Day, we see a post about Happy Singles Day or Happy Sadness Alone Day but here's the thing. These kinds of things, and there is a deep philosophical discussion to be had about ideological counterweights. But the thing about Valentine's Day is that some of these anti-Valentine's Day sentiments in their own way form the same sort of influence the event itself has. Top 10 ways to be single on Valentine's Day. Again, the obligation can be insidious. If you are not in a paired couple on this most frustrating of holidays, you might be expected to conform to a separate coping mechanism, though one no less prescriptive. In a way, these responses to the thing, right, which is, say, Valentine's Day, these anti-Valentine's Days, give power to Valentine's Day as a structure. They acknowledge and encourage it by being its opposite. And I say, fuck all that. When it comes down to it, the thing that irks me about all this is that there is any source of external influence trying to tell me how to behave. I've talked a lot on Hot for Teacher about what I think makes a relationship. That a relationship should only be the things that the people in it want to be doing together. There is a pervasive cultural influence that can affect what each person wants. Our desires don't just spring up from nowhere, right? Usually, desire is a subtle palette. When we come into a relationship, nobody gives permission to these cultural effects to change or manipulate our behavior, right? Our gender, our culture, our religion, everything that makes up the background radiation of our lives can affect how we enter a relationship and how we behave within that relationship. The structures of power that are present in our lives affect our relationships. And it can take a lot of work to get to a place where we're able to question our desires and choices. But a great place to start, if you're interested in figuring out where influence comes from, is a big red flag like Valentine's Day. Now, it's really easy because Valentine's Day says, hey, buy chocolates, buy cards, buy roses. Hey, go to a fancy restaurant. Hey, love somebody in only this prescribed specific way. Valentine's Day is turning your emotional qualities into sweet, pure grade, highly concentrated feelings nerps. And nobody's feelings, are a commodity. So, on this most egregious of manipulative holidays, take some time, either alone or with a friend or loved one, and talk about what you think or feel about the ways Valentine's Day and other similar cultural edifices expect you to behave. There is so much to be gained by getting comfortable with that sort of conversation, working together with another person to sort out the difference between I want and I feel obligated to and I want you to versus I expect. Use Valentine's Day as an excuse to start talking about your feelings of obligation and expectation and learn to navigate them together. This can be a good springboard into conversations about what a relationship looks like for you. What you've navigated intentionally and what you're assuming without ever having discussed it. I think there's very little more important than our relationships with the people close to us. Very, very little. I can think of very few things that I care about more. The best way I know to do justice to a thing that I care about is to examine it, to look at it with care and with interest. Doing that is only going to help you understand it better. And understanding a thing is the first step towards making it work. And if you come to the end of that conversation about this weird, awkward, enforced romance day, and you and the person you're talking with both agree that maybe chocolates and cards and roses and champagnes are all actually super fucking great and reinforcing, that's awesome. You did it. Just because a thing starts off weird and commercialized doesn't mean we can't still enjoy it. If you end up deciding that you're not into Valentine's Day, I want you to remember that, like any other cultural tradition that makes you unhappy, you are allowed to opt out. Assess the givens in your life. Look at what other people expect of you. Look at what you expect of yourself and weigh that against what actually makes you happy. Nobody, fucking nobody can tell you that you have to do something you don't want to do. Nobody can hold their relationship with you hostage to enforce your behavior. If they try, fuck them. I mean, don't. Disregard them. Let's be clear. We can make choices for other reasons than our own gratification. We can make selfless choices. We can do things that do not benefit us directly for the sake of someone else. That is a choice that we can make. But in the end, if something is hurting you, if a relationship assumption is putting you in a place that's making you miserable, you can always say no. No is your superpower. No is a way for you to exert control, even in some tiny way, over what might feel like a helpless situation. If you've been dating someone for a while and you're feeling pressure to get serious, you can say no. If you've hung out with somebody a few times and you've decided you don't feel any chemistry with that person and they want to make out, you can say no. Say no to sex, say no to cohabitation, say no to babies, say no to Valentine's Day if you want to. The reason that no is so powerful is because that's what makes yes so good. If you feel comfortable opting out of all the negative relationship horseshit that can worm its way into your life, that makes your opting in a meaningful experience. So let's make Valentine's Day something that we can stomach. Instead of feeling obligated to perform the dance of culturally mandated romance behavior, let's throw it out and find our own way. Let's use communication. Let's use conversation with the people close to us and an understanding of what we actually like, value, and care about. And let's make our own damn holiday. One where we get to set the terms. And then let's do that every goddamn day of the year. Let's look at the structures of relationship assumption around us all the time and choose to move through the world with intentionality and integrity instead of expectation and obligation. It's a lot of work, but hell, what's a better time to start than now, huh? So that's Valentine's Day. That's my feelings about Valentine's Day. That's my Valentine's Day rant 2018. I hope that it was interesting and informative for you. I hope that it inspires you to have conversations about your relationships with the people you care about and build something that means something to you. Because if we just coast on our expected obligations, then what's the point of being alive? What is the point of going through those motions? So this has been the very special episode of Hot for Teacher. I hope that you've enjoyed it. You can, of course, you can visit my website, www.adam-koble.com. You can click on Hot for Teacher, and if you have specific questions for future episodes, you can go ahead and ask them there. And I hope you will tune in for future advice from me. But for now, we've got like 20 minutes or so. Chat friends, let's answer some questions. Do you have questions for me? I know Keeters does. Keeters asked me a question. Oh, if you want to submit a question through the NERPS box and you want to be anonymous, I don't know, like you won't be able to be anonymous to me, but you can tell me not to say your username. Yeah, Keeters was asking, having recently started a relationship that doesn't use traditional labels, how do I go about reinforcing to my friends that distinction? People still have problems not using terms like girlfriend or partner, right? My term for this relationship. Also, you got to keep them short because they will cut off the end of the question. So Keeters, if there was more after people still have problems not using terms like partner or girlfriend, then that's a thing. So I've talked about taxonomy and how it serves a dual purpose, right? Calling someone by a name that's not their name can to them be reinforcing, right? If you have like a secret special name with another person, that can be really fun to share, right? That to everyone else, you're one person, but to a friend, you're a specific nickname. These are these patronyms, I think they're called. Patronyms are they're there to reinforce an intimacy with a close relationship. They're a way to say we care about each other in a way that other people don't necessarily have access to, and that's great. But most of the time, wife, girlfriend, husband, partner, whatever, can be used for other people's benefit to signal certain things. So, for example, I'm at a party and I say to a person that I am introducing to someone that I am romantically connected to, and I say, coworker, this is my boyfriend, Rodrigo. What am I saying? Why am I signaling to my coworker this person's relationship to me? Why does that matter? Why do I preface it with, this is my boyfriend, Rodrigo? Not, this is Rodrigo. He's really good at racquetball, right? Why not, this is Rodrigo. Other relevant fact, this is Rodrigo. He also likes spreadsheets. Coworker from accounting, you like spreadsheets. Like, why not do that? Because I think that as chat is calling out, it's a possessive, right? It's to let people know, coworker, this is Rodrigo, my boyfriend. You can't have him. He is not available for you to have sex with. Do not flirt with him. He is my boyfriend. I am establishing a boundary here for you. That's why I don't like it. That's why I don't like titles. That's why I don't like that stuff, because I think that it's reductive. It reduces humans. It turns them into belongings. And also, I would rather treat someone like a person and then have that conversation, right? To be like, this is Rodrigo. He's an excellent racquetball player. Because then the onus falls on the new person to be like, oh, I love racquetball. Or, oh, did you meet playing racquetball? Or whatever. Like, it forces people to ask questions, Because I think in a lot of contexts, people want to be like, oh, hello, Rodrigo. Are you and my coworker fucking? They don't want to have to ask that, but they want to know. Because humans are social animals. We look at the way that we interact with each other and we want to ask these things, but we're too scared to. And so we expect a shorthand. So I think the best way to reinforce our relationships with people is to do so to them, right? Telling someone, this is Rodrigo, we're in love and we have sex like a lot. Also, he likes racquetball. I think that's awkward and weird. And it brings up contextual information that people might want, but that we don't have to bring up. But we can show our relationships in other ways. Honestly, I frankly do not feel like I need my relationship with people to be reinforced that way because of the structures of my relationships, right? Like, I don't need someone to say, this is Adam. He's my boyfriend. Don't flirt with me because I have a boyfriend. Don't flirt with him. He's my boyfriend. Like, it's just all such complex horseshit to me. I would rather be like, hey, this is Adam. He really likes Dungeons and Dragons. He made a game. It's called Dungeon World. You like board games, right? Have you ever played a role-playing game? Adam, Rodrigo, Adam. And then me and Rodrigo get to form our own relationship that you can be a part of, but you're not coloring by taxonomizing me. So I don't know. I mean, you got to build that stuff. You got to work on that with the people you're in relationships with. And the best thing to do is just ask someone, how do you want me to introduce you to people? What is a meaningful way for me to talk about you? Does that feel good when I call you my whatever? And you can agree, but you have to remember that these words carry weight. There's shorthand built in. If you call someone your boyfriend, that is saying something to people. So keep that in mind. Nano, I'm going to get to your question, but Dave asked a follow-up. Dave Human says, I'm sorry this sounds like a trick question, so I'll preface this by saying I don't mind at all. I know you don't, Dave. I believe I asked you about this once, so I have your permission for this behavior. But Dave is asking, how come I tend to be my friend Dave in shoutouts and stuff? So Dave, I am really proud of being your friend. I am really happy that we're friends, and I think that in a way I have a cachet, right? I have influence. When I say, this is the movie Blade Runner versus this is a movie I really like, it's called Blade Runner, I am boosting something. I am telling people this is a thing you need to pay the fuck some attention to, right? This thing matters. So when I say my friend Dave or my boy Dave, I am telling people pay attention to this Dave. This is an endorsement of Dave. I am celebrating the fact that I like you and that we are friends. I'm proud of our friendship. And it feels good to me to say, this is my friend Dave. We're friends. Dave likes me. I like Dave. We're buds. You should probably also like Dave because Dave is great, right? So that's a thing that I'm doing to reinforce to the world around me that you're an important person that I know. And that's the kind of thing that I try to do for people in ways that I have been given permission to do. In the same way that I reinforce my relationship with Blue Jay by posting photos of Blue Jay. That is an expression of affection that I have for her, and a way to show the people that are in our shared space, like, hey, I like spending time with this person, and I think that that she is really nice to look at, and I would like to share that with you, the internet. Look at how lovely this person is, right? And that's a thing we've talked about, and that I've gotten explicit permission to do. We've negotiated that. So it's those rituals that I think are important to discuss and to have consent on and to be around people in a way that feels good for everybody. And there are ways to celebrate your relationship with someone without just being like, this is my boyfriend. Don't fucking touch Rodrigo. All right. It's Rodrigo. Look at his sexy pecs. Don't touch him. He's good at racquetball. Right. So that's the thing. So Nanosphere asked, how do we handle the awkwardness of starting this talk about bucking implicit values? God, I know, right? So the smartest move that you can manage is start it on the down low, right? Start it when you begin your relationship. Just do it at the start. Be like, yo, let's be friends. What does that mean to you? Like, when you think about us being friends, what sounds like fun? Like, do you want to play racquetball with me and Bill? We like racquetball, Rodrigo. Would that be a cool, fun part of our friendship? Are there special activities that you consider to be like one friend only things? Like if you take me to a restaurant that you really like, the next day, if I take Bill to that restaurant, are you going to feel like weird? Has that become our restaurant? If me and you, Rodrigo, are watching True Blood together and then I skip an episode with you and I watch it with Bill instead, is that going to hurt your feelings? If we're talking about going to see Black Panther and I go to see it with Bill before you and I see it together, is that going to feel bad for you? What kinds of things mean something to you, and how can we negotiate those things together? So starting at the very beginning, when you first get involved with a person, you'll get over that awkwardness by saying, hey, like, I just want to negotiate our friendship. I just want to know what feels good and what feels bad for you as a person. And as the relationship builds, you're going to be founding it on good principles of consent and care. So that later, when you're at that work party and you're like, yo, this is Rodrigo. You and Rodrigo have a good, solid relationship, whatever shape it takes. And yes, it can be uncomfortable to be like, hey, so we're talking about or thinking about doing a sex thing together. Let's have a conversation about sexual health. Let's have a conversation about who we're having sex with. Let's have a conversation about what kinds of stuff we might want to do. And I think the more you do it, the better you get at it. And I say better, not in that it will stop being awkward, but in that you will know how to play through that awkwardness. I think you just have to make it about the relationship being important enough to get through that shit. And I've said things like this before. I invite anyone who I am in a relationship with of any sort, whether it's we've talked a few times on the internet, whether we're friends who've been friends forever, whether we're dying together at the end of our lives and we've been friends since we were born. I don't care. I don't care the depth of the relationship. You have permission to engage with me about our relationship. That is a part of every relationship that I have. Period. And it's important to me because I like these conversations and I want to get better at it. Every one that I have, I get better. Quantum Dot says, so I don't like the concept of claiming someone much either. However, folks tend to misgender me and misunderstand my relationship with my partners. People refer to us as sisters, and that sucks. Yes, being misgendered fucking blows. I'm sorry that happens to you, Quantum. What are your thoughts on folks who want to clarify their relationship with similar kinds of signaling but might not use the term partner? Not necessarily because I want this for myself, but because it's something I think about a lot. Listen, I don't think it is unreasonable to use terminology of any kind to reinforce individual or group identities. I don't think there is anything wrong with a person looking at themselves or someone else and saying, here are ways that I can identify this person. We do this all the time, right? We do this with gender. We do this with things we like. We do this with our job, right? We have an internalized character sheet of the fields that make us up, right? We have gender field. We have career field. We have these things where we can say, hi, my name is Adam. I am a man. I am a role player. I am an anarchist. I am a nihilist. I am queer. These are labels that I have chosen for myself. And I think that we can give other people permission or rescind that permission to label us in the same way because it can be reinforcing. So if it's reinforcing for you to say, go ahead and call me your boyfriend, not only because it talks about our relationship with each other, which we've agreed on, but it's a way for you to help me reinforce my gender to other people. And I think that's good and powerful. And just because I tend not to like being labeled doesn't mean that I think it won't work for everybody else. That's a thing. So yeah, I mean, obviously, like everything else, you negotiate it with people. You do that so that you have that level field with someone and you understand it. So Red Virus, and we're coming short on time. Red Virus asked, do you have any book recommendations about these topics? Jesus. I mean, I imagine that there are lots and lots of books about gender theory, books about relationships. I will personally recommend, and I've done so before. I will personally recommend a book by Eve Rickert and Franklin Vo called More Than Two. It's not perfect, but it's full of anecdotes. And what's interesting about anecdotes is that they show not how things are, but how things might be for specific people. So More Than Two, that is a book I would suggest. If you're interested in looking at a bunch of different ways people can navigate relationships, it's a good resource. Do some digging. There's lots of YouTube channels that talk about this stuff. Queer theory is a thing that you can learn about. There are courses in school. But when you read anything, go into it in the same way you would a relationship. Try to step aside from your expectations. Don't feel obligated to agree or disagree. Look at anyone's opinion, even my own, maybe especially my own, as something to be questioned. Feel what you feel about what I'm saying and examine why you feel that way, right? If I say it can be harmful to call someone your boyfriend without permission, and you feel weird or angry or upset about that, try to understand why you're having that reaction. Doesn't mean that I'm wrong or you're wrong. That's the thing about relationships. And I guess this is what I kind of want to close on, is that relationships should always be only the things that the people in them all want. Valentine's Day, cultural normativity, they are not invited to your relationship unless you intentionally invite them in. And if you do that, make sure you're making that decision with someone else. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy Valentine's Day. Just enjoy it because you want to, not because Twitter and Hallmark and all the champagne and roses and chocolates in the world tell you to, all right? You be you. Construct your relationships from scratch. Do the awkward work. It'll pay out, I promise. And that's it for today's episode. Thanks for coming, everybody. I hope that you had a good time. Hope you learned something. Hope you had a feeling or two. I know I did. And I will see you next time for more Hot for Teacher.